everyone, and welcome back to Culturama. I have with me the one and only What If All History. Rudyard, is that your name correct?
Rudyard.
Rudyard. Thank you, Rudyard, for joining us today. I am a longtime viewer of your channel, and I know a lot of the audience is as well that's watching this show here. And for those that don't know, that are happening to watch this show and don't know him, he is, I would say, a rather well-known YouTuber. And I'm just gonna let you, Rudyard, introduce yourself and where people can find you.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm Rudyard, and I think Daniela did a pretty good intro for me.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Rudyard, I do want to ask you some questions here about some of the issues that we have covered on this show so far. I don't know if you've been watching, but we have been talking about the 4B movement. And I know that you've commented on the 4B movement before on your Twitter and elsewhere. So I kind of want to ask your opinion on that. And I kind of shared my opinion, but you've been kind of taking a black pill approach to this. Could you explain your views on the movement and why we should be concerned about it?
I had been covering the 4B movement for a few years
Mm-hmm.
because it fit into a paradigm I've been working with for about 2 years, and that paradigm is mouse utopia.
Yes.
And the way my mind works is I run a variety of different simulations, and I look at evidence and I think, does the new evidence, because I know I don't know things. So when I look at new evidence, I think, which of several paradigms does this fit into? And I got into mouse utopia because the question you asked is, I'm going to take it to be a mouse utopia question because it leads so directly to it, where mouse utopia was a study that was done about 30 times in the late 60s. And the purpose of the study was they dropped a handful of mice in infinitely perfect conditions where infinite food, no disease, no external predators, and the mouse population each time jumped from 6 mice to 2,000. And keep in mind, there's a threshold of 6,000 mice that this place could hold. And what happened each time was the complete breakdown of mouse society, where you saw a series of deviant behaviors as well as the collapse of the birth rate to zero, killing the mouse colony every single time. Then you saw psychopathic aggressive mice.
Mm-hmm.
And they killed off the other mice. You had mice who couldn't breed. You had the female mice got more masculine. The male mice got more effeminate. You had these mice that would lick themselves with the beautiful ones. And so the mouse social structure totally broke down. And I kept on seeing evidence post-COVID that only fit into the mouse utopia paradigm, which is what really scared me. There were things I didn't see in the historic record that I saw that we were doing that mouse utopia did. And so one of them, or two of them at least, are NEETs in the 4Bs. And the NEET is a term from Japan. Both of these are terms from our allies in Asia, Korea and Japan. And the 4B movement is women completely abstaining from all activity with men. I know it's sex. Is it also romantic relationships?
Yes, it's like dating, marriage, and giving birth as well.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's a real clear mouse utopia thing, or one of the parts of mouse utopia is just the complete breakdown of shared community and shared society and the complete collapse of the birth rate to zero. And I looked at East Asia as a future for mouse utopia because all of the mouse utopia trends are happening faster in Asia than America. So I looked to both Japan and Korea for the 4B movement and the NEETs. So I predicted both several years in advance. And these are not predictions I want to have. These are not predictions I want to see. And so when I do see them, it's just horrifying because the implications of mouse utopia are so insane.
Mm-hmm. And you did say that this started off in Asia, and you've seen that even the terminologies that we apply here today started in Asiatic countries. Do you think like that's a specific pattern, or is that just due to chance? Like, is there like a reason for that?
So how based is your audience?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know if you just saw, I don't know if you just saw. I just got a comment from some. I forgot the username. He said that there is a real issue with cultural and ethnic or racial replacement happening in the United States. And what I talked about is that I do typically, especially when it pertains to politics and policy, I typically focus on culture rather than the ethnic foundation of some of these differences. However, what I did say, and I truthfully believe, is that a lot of values, tradition, culture does naturally follow from certain ethnic divides and certain ethnic groups. So I don't think there's any issue in coming from a place where we say, look, there are particular predilections that certain populations have, and we should be able to have that discussion. But I just genuinely wondering what your opinion is on that, or if you think like this is just
So
a chance thing.
I heard that loud and clear.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that I would actually chalk up to race, and not because culture is. I've studied anthropology and I've studied genetic and cultural differences, and I'm more so on the cultural side of people on the DR.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of things that we do chalk up to race is actually culture, but Asian society is more neotenous and K-selected, which the Japanese are the most K-selected population in the world, followed by the Koreans. They're the first people to do this. And K-selected populations are more dependent upon group activity and upon group approval. And one of the things we have found is genetic is Asians have significantly higher effects of social approval on them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think it's cultural because if it was, it might be, but these are so intertwined, it's hard to draw a limit past a certain point. And um, cultural factors, I would have expect Northwest Europe to happen first because Mouse Utopia is a downstream effect of the Industrial Revolution.
Mm,
And so if it was a purely cultural thing, I would have guessed it would happen in the countries that had the Mount Utopia breakthrough earlier. But otherwise, I think it's a genetic or cultural thing because Korea has the harshest effects of anywhere, but it's also a country that's only industrialized in the last generation, which is strange.
right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And so you say that they have a greater predilection genetically. You mentioned to kind of like go with the group, right? In terms of like finding their identity with more of a collectivist outlook.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
interesting. I also know personally, I've looked into some like studies relating to this, and I did see that even when it comes to infants and babies, um, I, I found this study that said like Chinese babies were less likely to even cry, or they had a less likelihood to find it to be like disturbed from external influences as well, and they were more kind of like steady in their emotional output than Caucasian babies or other infants. So I also find
Yeah.
that quite interesting. And yeah, you can't deny those patterns of behavior, like, and these are infants, these aren't people that have been exposed to society to the same degree adults have, or even teenagers or kids have. So
Yeah.
that is interesting to take into account. So yeah, and started off in more Asiatic countries, more Oriental cultures, and it bled over to the West, right? And so, what do you think the long term effects will this be? Do you think, well, naturally, you think there's going to be a greater divide and a greater partisanship between the sexes, and do you think that bleeds into politics as well?
This is the long-term effect. It Mouse Utopia is not going to be fun. I
Yeah.
don't know what to tell you. I've never sold you on that. Um, so, if current trends continue, there will be 4 Koreans at the end of this century for every 100 now.
Wow.
And
Okay.
the thing that really scares me is that we have pretty wide standard deviations for computer models on population decline. The results around the world in every continent are are faster than our fastest computer models. And that's true in Colombia, it's true in America, it's true in India. The only place in the world that has a sustainable birth rate is Africa now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's falling fast too. And I suspect that humans did not evolve for urban environments, and we have to remember how recent the Industrial Revolution was. The first country in the world to industrialize or get majority urban was Britain in 1850. America only became majority urban until 1920, and even today, half of Americans are suburban, which is why white Americans stabilize at one of the highest birth rates of any population in the world. because after there's the population crash, which is really rapid, and it's really bad, especially in China. And in China, the government was lying about the stats, and the stats are worse than even we thought. And it's just insane. And this is a historic event. I don't know what that means. I don't know who will win. I don't know what the final culmination of that would be. But what we're looking at now is a truly historic event. And I find people get chart thinking, line go up equal world gooder.
Right, yeah.
There's reverse of that, line go down equal world worse. And you get chart mindset, and then you have to break out of it and realize you're looking at a historic event in retrospect. So an example of that is World War One was caused by slight deviations in industrial manufacturing across Europe. The British and the French were worried the Germans would outcompete them industrially. The Germans were worried the Russians would outcompete them. And so someone before the time could think, look, the charts for Europe, we're all growing so fast, and there's a weird differentiation in chart, and that chart means a major war. Or Germany and Russia had this youth bulge of young people in the early 20th century, and that manifested in the world wars. The Anglo-French youth bulge was the colonization of the British Empire, the population of the Americas, the Industrial Revolution, and the Napoleonic Wars. So we are looking at a historic event about to happen. It's unclear what it is, but the world at the end of this will be vastly different in any conceivable way from today.
Oh man, that's pretty scary to think about. You did mention also, I saw in your content that you did kind of mention the idea that there is a potential for civil war, right? Another civil war happening.
Yeah.
With Trump winning, especially the popular vote, do you think there's a greater likelihood of that occurring now?
Um, so does the election of Trump increase the rate of civil war?
Or like the potential of it occurring, or do you think, because what I've noticed is that the left wing, they seem to be kind of low energy too, though. Like, I know that they planned a lot of these rallies afterwards, or protests rather, and a lot of people didn't show up from what I'm gathering. I don't know if those are just memes or not, but it seems to me they are lower energy. Or do you think they're just depressed? Perhaps I'm looking at the short term, but do you think that the chances of a civil war happening is increased because of Trump's win?
I think they're stable. I've So, are you familiar with Peter Turchin's work?
Vaguely.
Yeah. Peter Turchin pulled them from one of my favorite authors, David Hackett Fisher, the Albion Seed guy, and DHF looked at inflation patterns to predict national breakdowns.
Okay.
And so, French Revolution, 30 Years War, Black Death. That happens every 250 years as far as we have records. And then Peter Turchin, he made a computer model to predict these, and he has used these for Chinese civil wars. He's used these for a variety of historic events alongside the ones I just named. And he said in 2010, based off three economic variables, that America would have a civil war like this in the 2020s. And
Interesting.
every single variable he looked at has gotten way worse, and also our political conflict has gotten way worse. And I look at a variety of other historic cycles. I'm pulling together like five for my prediction we'll have a civil war soon. But the short answer I would give is that America is so broken on a fundamental level that you have to have a war to reset, and that brokenness is a combination of like 20 different things. It's inequality, it's more normal people being poor, it's bureaucratic overreach, it's corrupt control of the economy. America has so many issues that the only way we can reset is through a revolution in the manner of the French Revolution. And I think we've hit that level of critical tension. And I've said before, I am very happy that Trump. Trump is not America. I am very happy that Trump won this election because that gave him and us de jure right to rule for the next 4 years. Because in a civil war like this, I have an 80% probability the right wins and a 20% probability it loses. The 20% probability is that the military, which leans conservative, fights against the conservatives because the left has such legal legitimacy. And we've completely removed that. If there's a civil war now, it would happen upon our terms with our legal legitimacy, which would move the chances of a rightist victory up to nearly 100%. Because the right has a central geographic location, influence in most of the military, the police, the gun owners, its resources, agriculture, um, industry, electricity. The right would. I am more optimistic of the right winning a civil war, but I think we'll still have a civil war. If you'd like, I can explain where I think the left is at now emotionally and what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I let me know your thoughts on that. I'd be interested.
Yeah, so the left is worked themselves up to an emotional fever pitch that they can't let themselves down from. It's like a thunderstorm where the condensation increases and it has to rain to let out. And I think the left has, because the problem is they remove all the dissenters. They remove the people who tell them no. They remove the people who are they remove the reasonables
Yeah.
and past. So when I was a teenager, I moved from rural Pennsylvania to downtown Philly. And I went from majority conservative, level 3 wokeness to level 8 wokeness. And as a teenager, I realized wokeness would ultimately kill itself for this reason that it gets stuck in these purity spirals it can't break out of, and it's an anti meritocratic system
Right.
because it's a racial caste system. And what I see is that the wokies, my ultimate thesis is that the wokies have enough institutional power that they cannot let go of because the right threatens them because their order is fundamentally inefficient and silly and useless with AI. I like to say you could replace the entire managerial state with due to three words: AI, the internet, and wokeness.
Yeah.
AI and the internet means you can have non-bureaucratic coordination that occurs asynchronously, independently. AI could replace the entire bureaucracy with codes. And then wokeness is showing the bureaucracy to be so completely deranged that they've discredited themselves. And I believe with these three things that they are in a position of fundamental weakness and they want to strike against the right, where multiple leftist think tanks have said that the left will launch a coup with the intelligence agencies if Trump wins. Or they've shadowboxed it. With what's that other thing? Oh yeah, Jamie Raskin, Democrat senator, said that they'd throw out the results of the election with the 14th Amendment. And so
Right.
what I think is going on is the left is in a place of desperation, and I've said before, I believe that the civil war would start this year. And I could be wrong there. The bet that I put more weight on is that we will have a civil war in the next 4 years.
4 years. Okay. Well,
If it doesn't,
got to stock up on those on canned goods, everyone, just in case things start to shut down. But no, that's scary, and no, I could see that happening. I did also wanted to ask you and kind of like shift towards more politics now, but we do see the partisanship divide between the sexes and between certain populations of people here in the United States. What do you think the future is for more so political ideology of the United States? Because like as we are seeing politically, we are becoming more partisanship, more partisan, right? And especially with the introduction of Trump in 2016 into political movements and in the conservative movement, do you think that even the Republican Party itself has a future, or do you think that would split up? Because I think it's going to faction. But with Trump's win, I don't know now. I'm kind of shifting on that view. But do you think that the Republican Party has even any future, or do you think that's going to faction as well?
America needs to have two political parties, and it's
Mm-hmm.
always been a bi-party system due to the Electoral College. We're not a parliamentary system where you can split up into a sub-variety of different coalitions. The Scottish Nationalist Party or the Quebecois Independence Party, they would be folded into their Democrats or Republicans. You can't have the separatist parties here. So we're going to have two parties. The Republicans and the Democrats have been stable since the Civil War. Um, so at least one of them is going to survive, in my opinion. I don't know which. I think we're entering a period of profound chaos
Yeah.
where the future will be determined by choices that have not yet been made. Um, I think so. Both are in a point of transmutation where the right's transmutation was you had the old right and then Trump destroyed them, and now Trump is folding in tech people and schizos and autists to
Yeah.
form the coalition. And I think I'm optimistic for the new right faction. I was especially optimistic about working with Vance and Elon because they're genuinely innovative people who are not the old country club conservatives, and they're not foolish. I am a populist, but there are foolish populists. I don't mean to speak ill of populism.
Mm.
Uh, the left, meanwhile, have been consumed by a nihilistic death cult that has no interest in giving up power. And they're stuck between minority votes where they buy off the upper classes of the minorities, and the lower and the middle classes don't have much real incentive to cooperate. So I could see the right picking up minorities. I don't know if that will actually pan out. The coalitions are still in flux. It depends on who dies in the Civil War. I have to
Right.
cut out whatever factions get shot. Um,
Yeah.
and if you look at civil wars, it's normally rebel radical factions that take over. The Jacobins, the Bolsheviks, the Puritans, the radical Republicans, each were pretty small minorities until violence got them into power. Which is why I've said I think it's not improbable that legitimate far right nationalists take over the US government in the next 10 years. Um,
Right.
and
No, and I've seen I've seen like the death of legacy media occur, and I'm going to be talking about that after this segment here, but we are seeing like the pre-established networks that the left wing has run, but also establishmentarian right wingers have as well, finally die off or crumble at least. And with Trump's appointments and his picks, and I wanted to ask your opinion following after this question on that, but yeah, you are seeing him like introduce kind of like this new right or this new or an expansion of, I suppose, a bigger tent policy. I guess he's trying to introduce within the right wing or within the Republican Party, but with the appointment of Vance or even Elon just recently is pretty big. And so you actually answered my question before I was going to ask it, but I want to ask your attitude on this and what this means for the new right and the right wing movements. But I am pretty optimistic, and it's really interesting to see. And what I was happy to see actually, Trump now saying that he wants to completely upend and change the accreditation system in the United States, which is huge because, truthfully, I think the academic system has contributed to a lot of the problems we have here.
yeah,
So I want to ask your opinion on that as well, and what you do think of Trump's proposed policy so far.
I was so happy to see the attack on accreditation.
Yeah.
I'm a college dropout, so I don't support that system. Um, man, but the yeah, the thing with attack on universities is I think it's a very smart and a very stupid move because on one side, our ruling class for the last 70 years has been selected through the college system. So you're attacking the old ruling class, and I support that because I'm not a member of that system.
Mm.
And at the same time, I think the bureaucracy's done irreparable damage to America since its takeover with the world wars. However, when I worry about a future dark age, the end of universities is one of the best things that could start a dark age because
Mm.
universities have been the thing that has propelled knowledge generation. Gentlemen scholars are the people who make the intellectual breakthroughs to new fields, and then the professors count up the numbers and get the important info, so a new generation of gentlemen scholars can invent new academic fields. And although for the last generation, academics invented some different fields, but there was a total decline in the growth of scientific fields. So I am worried about if academia gets hurt, our intellectual capabilities going to the toilet. But I'm really optimistic about Elon and Vance and this crew with Tulsi Gabbard and RFK
Mm.
because I was looking at conservative coalition building, trying to predict a future faction. And this new faction offsets lots of negatives I was worried about, while at the same time has strengths that I was hoping the right would receive. Because the right could have taken a handful of worse directions. It could have I am a Christian, but I don't support Christian fundamentalism on a national level because it's just going to alienate people.
Mm.
It's going to alienate people who aren't fundamentalists. I think it works in states where they predominate and they're bad at converting new people. So I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm glad they didn't go for stupid populism because most populism around the world is pretty stupid in places like Argentina or it or a variety of European countries,
Mhm.
etc. I'm glad it didn't go for like just living off country club conservatives because the country club conservatives were the reason we got into this mess because like Romney, etc. And it went for a hard tech route, which is playing into a faction I need to make a name for, but I consider calling the Peter Thiel, Elon tech right the formists.
Okay,
Um,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, my idea for formism, and I'm going to have to make a video just explaining my concept of formism, is that an interesting ideology for these people is replicating the Platonic forms in the real world. And because you're combining religious with tech ideas, it's basically we are generating technological progress while at the same time doing so in a way that's ethical with higher forms.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, you're gonna have to make a video on that one. That sounds like that you heard it here first, folks. Potential what if alt history video in the making, in the works. We this is a breaking news platform. Thank you for
So,
sharing that. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I drop video ideas like 10 times a week.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, my idea is that you could develop, I think, formism with this tech science coalition. You could pull from Hinduism and Hermeticism to have interesting mystic science connections. Um, so I'm optimistic about these people because I think fundamentally it's a smart coalition and it's non-ideological and it's big tent. And those are three things that are difficult to put together. And I'm so glad that they've fallen out of the purity spiraling because I see the purity spiraling as the thing that's going to hurt the right the most in the future if it's projected forward. But I think this Trump coalition has to add in, they have to get a little bit more schizo, but I think that's going to happen through their integration with the general population.
Yeah, and it's interesting you do bring that up because I did kind of notice that with Trumpism now, especially with the previous RNC that we just had, is that there is this more of a big tent approach to, introducing new names and new viewpoints even within the Republican Party and the conservative movement. And it'll be really interesting to see where that goes. Trump also seems to be pretty plugged in and aware of even alternative media systems, like I mentioned earlier in this stream that he mentioned Joe Rogan in his speech, and Peter Thiel. So it's really interesting for him to be aware of that, and it's also very exciting. And him bringing in JD Vance, it was a big flag for that happening as well. Before we wrap this up, I did kind of want to ask you because you already mentioned the DR, but how influential do you think the DR is presently in the conservative movement, or do you think it will become more influential? Or do you think it's just like a minor blurb right now happening within conservative history?
I have a running joke with my friends, and the joke is I asked people what's the state of the right today and I asked people, I've asked this to many people on the right, what are the factional breakdowns of the different parts of the right? What percent are Nazis? What percent are libertarians? What percent are theocrats? What percent are Lovecraftian Gothic theocrats? And you go through all of that. And I've asked every person, and every single answer is, I don't know. And so I
Right.
said the state of the right is people don't know.
Yeah.
It's this state of formless chaos that will have something come out of it. But the formless chaos itself is the most important variable, in the same manner where I've been reading a lot on the 19th century history of the left. And there was a period after the French Revolution when the left was what the right is today. It was just schizos in Twitter talking to each other, batting around ridiculous ideas in a broad tent coalition that wasn't sure what it was about. And then the left had a variety of thinkers that it formed into actual organizations, but that wasn't always the case. And the right's there now where we're in a place of enormous creativity where something could happen. And it's just that has to happen yet. But as of now, the chaos itself is the most important variable. And what I see here is actually think the DR is one of the factions I'm most white pilled on. Because I've lived a strange life and I've seen a lot of different industries. And most industries in America are high school. And what I mean by that is that they are corrupt. They're done through who went to school with whom. They're done with buddies contracts without a concept of merit. And the two industries that aren't are parts of tech and parts of the right. And what I do see is the DR has social mobility and it has a cleverness and a responsiveness to its environment that's lacking. And the mainstream right can't do that. It lacks any creativity. It lacks any vitality. And so when I look at the place where there's creativity, I see that ideas either generated on the tech right or on YouTube in social media or on the DR will be the ideas that predominate. So my guess is that ideas developed in the DR now. Whenever I see DR, I think Dominican Republic.
You're right.
But
For those that
the
don't know, it
DR,
means dissident right. It's a dissident right
yes.
movement. Yeah.
So for the DR, I think ideas we develop now will be heard about in centuries. And this is one of the things my friend Uber Boyo has brought up, that in the last cycle is the French Revolution until the present. Leftism dominated that cycle. This is an interesting idea where between each secular cycle, a different ideology predominates. So between the French Revolution and today, it's left versus right. French Revolution to 30 Years' War is mercantilism versus capitalism. 30 Years' War to the Black Death is church and 30 years is Protestant versus Catholic, and then Black Death, the fall of the Frankish Empire, is Holy Roman Emperor versus state. So I believe that the situation we are in now will develop intellectual currents that will dominate in the Western world until the 23rd century.
Okay, that's exciting. Actually, I'm good. It's good for you to say that. Well, I'm gonna have to wrap this up because we are going a little overtime. But I want to thank you so much, Rudyard, for joining my little stream here. Big fan of you and your work. So thank you for joining. I highly appreciate it. And for those that don't know who he is, his name is What If Alt History. He is on YouTube, and I'm gonna share. I'm gonna show the screen and after the commercial break of your YouTube channel and where people can find you and follow you, and I will also share your Twitter as well. Are there any other areas that people want to find you, or do you have any last comments or thoughts?
No, it's been